Dito po ako may issue. I believe that the office of the President is a civilian office, not a uniformed or military, composed of uniformed and military personnel. And even if it may have some of them, that should not be highlighted because the constitutional policy is we should always highlight civilian supremacy over the military. So my assumption is that the President, kasi the Office of the President has both confidential and intelligence funds. Pagdating po dun sa confidential expenses, according to the joint circular, which is being used as the authority governing the grant and the use of confidential and intelligence funds. Confidential expenses refer to those expenses pertaining or related to surveillance activities in civilian government agencies that are intended to support the mandate or operations of the agency. And I have no issue with the grant of confidential fund to the Office of the President, a civilian government agency with a multi-dimensional, multifaceted operations, responsibilities, and tasks. No problem sa concept of granting. So it's on the reasonableness na lang po ang ating titignan. Okay. My problem is with the intelligence expenses because our own governing document define this as referring to those related to intelligence information gathering activities of uniformed and military personnel and intelligence practitioners that have direct impact to national security. Dito po ako may issue. I believe that the Office of the President is a civilian office, not a uniformed or military, composed of uniformed and military personnel. And even if it may have some of them, that should not be highlighted because the constitutional policy is we should always highlight civilian supremacy over the military. And I don't think the Office of the President is composed of intelligence practitioners. The President himself and as well as his office are consumers of intelligence already gathered and organized by the intelligence practitioners under, which are the agencies, some agencies under the Office of the President in the executive branch. So that is actually my question, Mr. President. Why did the Office of the President request for intelligence funds and at the level found in the NEP, which is around 2.3 billion pesos, if I remember correctly, Mr. President?
The question, Your Honor, is why did the Office of the President request for these funds at that level?
Yes. So it's a compound question, Mr. President. The una is why did it ask, and then why at that amount, Mr. President?
That is the amount that you mentioned, Your Honor, is the amount that it's been set for the last 4 years, since 2020. 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, and now for 2024, Your Honor.
So on the why, does the Office of the President believe that it is a composed of uniformed and military personnel and it is composed of intelligence practitioners, Mr. President?
I think we discussed this during the committee hearing, Your Honor. You raised this point, and the answer given by the Executive Secretary then is that the President is both the user and generator of confidential and intelligence information. And to make, as the Commander-in-Chief, he needs to make very crucial decisions. So the importance of information cannot be understated, Your Honor. And the possibility that he gets filtered information should be bypassed or should not be there, Your Honor. He should be the one getting, although perfect information is impossible in this day and age, but he should be receiving as reliable and as good, as wide as possible information, Your Honor.
Well, Mr. President, the President of the Republic is the National Chief Executive. Lahat, control yun eh. The power of the executive branch is actually control, unless I'm mistaken. I will be corrected by our Chief Justice and Attorney Hubert Guevara. I think it's control. So below the President, kung around, let's round off, let's say 10 billion ang total CIF, tanggalin natin si 2.3, below the President would be 7.7 billion pesos worth of confidential and intelligence funds under his control, Mr. President. So, and then, similarly, ang Pilipinas, pinattern naman natin yung system of government natin sa United States of America. President of the United States of America is also the Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Armed Forces. Just correct me, sir, if I'm wrong. No? And actually, the President of the United States is just briefed with the intelligence results of his intelligence community under him, around 16 agencies, I think. The intelligence funds go to the 16, not to the office of the President of the United States of America, even though he may be, or he is the Commander-in-Chief of their armed forces. So, ayaw ko kung bakit yung good practices kinokopyahan natin, ayaw natin kopyahin dito sa Republika ng Pilipinas, Mr. President.
Well, I'm not too familiar, to be quite frank, with the U.S. system, Your Honor. But I know they also have what they call the black budget, where certain budgetary expenditures are not disclosed publicly if they refer to spending on classified items. And they're, in fact, unauthorized disclosures are punishable under certain laws, especially if it benefits a foreign government or it's seen to be detrimental to the U.S. government. But although we do borrow a lot of our institutions from the U.S., we also modify them to match or meet local contexts and conditions, Your Honor. So if you look at our Constitution, for instance, like the U.S. now is facing a shutdown because of the budgetary deadlock. So hindi mangyayari ho yun sa atin because we have our own innovation, we have the reenacted budget. So I guess, you know, although we borrow, we also adapt. So siguro, maybe I would like to think that our current budgetary setup is although it's not a static condition, and we here in the Senate, in fact, work to amend it, to make it better, to reform it. His Honor is certainly one of the most hardworking in this respect. So, you know, so I think it's a response to how the actual experience, sabi nga ni Justice Holmes, diba? It's not only logic but experience which shapes the lawmaking process, Your Honor.
So thank you for mentioning that black budget, Mr. President. Actually, yun totality of the 16 security agencies, Mr. President. And then, hindi kasama dun yung Office of the President of the United States of America. Well, my point, Mr. President, is that this joint circular actually is a joint circular of the COA and the DBM. The DBM is part of the executive branch under the direct control of the Office of the President. And what happens here is that intelligence fund usage, the reports are submitted to the Office of the President. Or before the intelligence funds can be tapped, they have to be requested from the Office of the President. And then our system says that that office itself has its own intelligence fund. So nasira yung controls and checks system po natin. I mean, that's the entire checking system eh. That there is that Office of the President which controls, regulates, supervises, and checks the usage of intelligence funds. And yet, mismong siya ay binibigyan ng intelligence funds. So he reports to himself, Mr. President. So that is the weakness of how we have interpreted and implemented this joint circular.